Okay, I think we are ready to go. Thank you for joining us today for these sessions. This is the second episode of Business Expansion Series, and this time we are focused on expanding into Indonesia. So Indonesia is an emerging market with a very strong demographic advantage, and it is home to close to half of the populations in ASEAN. And this webinar, we provide you an opportunity to understand the market better. And after this webinar, will be followed by a virtual business matching sessions in Q1 next year. And the registration form will be made available at the end of this session. So please stay tuned with us until the end of the sessions. And now I would like to hand it over to our in-market expert, Hishamuddin Abu Bakar from Singapore Business Federations. He is the country head of Indonesia of SBF Global Divisions. Over to you, Sham.
Thank you, Eunice. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and especially to our both distinguished speakers. I'm Sham, Singapore Business Federation will be the moderator for today. First of all, special thanks to Indonesia Fintech Association and Singapore Fintech Association to make this event happen. We hope to see more business collaboration between both countries in the fintech arena. Just to remind again to participants, this webinar will be followed by a virtual business matching session in Q1 next year, 2022. Eunice has provided the link later for the registration form in the chat box. Next, I would like to introduce our two main speakers today's session. On the side note, we will try to end this session within an hour. And for any questions, please do not hesitate to type in the Q&A box. We have our first speaker, Pak Diki Wijaja, Chief Information Officer of Industry. How are you, Pak?
Good, Sham. Thank you for having me here today.
A short brief of his background. Pak Diki has more than 20 years professional experience in IT industry. Prior embarking his journey with Industry, he started off his career in the United States of America. And then he moves on to regional work that based in Singapore. Afterwards, Pak Diki heads back to Indonesia and joined Astra World, which is a listed Indonesian company and one of the biggest firms in the automotive industry. He has managed various prominent projects, solutions for big telco firms like Telkomsel and Indosat, including in the banking sector, such as one of the top banks in Indonesia, like Bank Central Asia, Bank Rakyat Indonesia, and other top financial institutions in Indonesia. Currently, Pak Diki is the Vice General Secretary of Indonesia Fintech since 2018. He's also a board member of Indonesia Chief Information Officer Community in Indonesia. So for today, Pak Diki will share with us the overview of the Indonesia fintech ecosystem and opportunity in Indonesia. So hand over to you, Pak Diki. Thank you so much, Pak Diki.
Thanks, Sham, for the introduction. You can get our slide up. So anyways, I'd like to welcome everyone from Singapore who's joined today's session. I'll be talking more about the Indonesian Fintech Association so that you understand the association, our association, as well as what we do exactly and how we can help with your expansion plan to Indonesia. Next, please. So Indonesian Fintech Association, or more commonly known as AFTEC, we're basically an association of industry representatives. And we are appointed by the Indonesian Financial Service Authority, specifically for the digital financial innovation players in Indonesia. But more than that, we're also an umbrella association or organization that covers all fintech companies or fintech verticals in Indonesia. Our vision is quite simple. Basically, we want to support Indonesia's financial inclusion through digital finance innovation. And the mission is basically to kind of help our government achieve their target, which is 90% for financial inclusion in 2024, which is actually written down in the National Strategy for Financial Inclusion. Next. This is kind of an overview of AFTEC itself. So we all started back in 2015. It started as a few early fintech companies in Indonesia, meeting over dinner, over lunch, and we felt like all the early players that we need to have kind of association to represent our collective needs or collective views on certain things. And we certainly met with all the regulators as well as the governments, the various ministries. And fast forward 2016 and 2018, we actually did kind of an offline, back when offline event was still possible, for Indonesian Fintech Festival and Conference. We also did Fintech Fair, and also in 2018 and 2019, 2020. Ever since then, every year we've always kind of our flagship event, Indonesia Fintech Summit and Expo, even though last year it's 100% online. Now, back in 2019, August, we were appointed to be the Association for the Digital Financial Innovation Players by our OJK, which is the Indonesian equivalent of MAS. And ever since then, we've taken a more proactive role in terms of managing our members, managing the fintech companies that it has just startup, or the one that incumbent players, many other new verticals that are popping up every other month or every other year. Next. To see how Avtech works, basically we have to support our vision and mission. We kind of split it up into 4 main tracks. So first track, of course, is about public policy. It's basically public policy advocacy, and we create a dialogue, a channel of communication channel, so to speak, with the government and the regulators. And this is a lot of the times the ministries or even regulators, before they issue certain policies or certain regulations, they will engage with Avtech as the industry representatives to see how we see the policy is going to affect not only our members, but also the industry and the economy as a whole. Now, the reason we've been a very good partners of our regulators is because we have, I think we might say that we have a very strong membership program and engagement, and that's achieved by the second track, which is the community collaboration, in which we partner with a lot of, with the same government agencies and ministries and also universities. In this, we actually do a lot of events. Back then, we do a lot of offline events. Now we do mostly webinars, in which we create, we discuss topics that would be useful for our members, especially whether that's to help them, be aligned with the new incoming policies or regulations, or just to see how they can hyper growth or hyper scale their growth and things like that. So we have events such as professional networking, expert gyms, expert lab, and we also do sometimes a regional fintech meetup, kind of like this one. And the third and the fourth is actually track is geared towards more of our the users of our member companies. To support the financial inclusion, basically, we know that we have to increase the digital finance literacy as well as the education itself. So this one is mostly, if the second track is the event itself is targeted inwards towards our members. The third one is actually targeted outwards, external parties. So we'll be general public or media. We do a lot of fintech talks. We do media visit. Basically, we are trying to explain whether it's a new cluster or a new business model. We try to explain to media to see how they can help educate the public, as well as we do a general public event where they can ask our members anything, or we explain the business model or the new technology that can be utilized by the general public. Of course, the last one is about knowledge and intelligence. It's basically mostly on we do research and surveys. So we work with third parties, any survey institutions. We do industry white papers. We do annual member survey, and to see what is the effect that our member has on their users or their economy. This actually also to support the public policy discussion, as well as the community collaboration, as well as digital financial literacy. This usually done on an annual basis because we want to show as well what is the effect of the fintech industry on Indonesian economy as a whole. Now, we can't achieve this working just within our members. So we definitely work with knowledge partners. We work with well-known institutions, international institutions as well, whether they do the survey for us or they basically they shared what they've done, or they've done their survey as well to the general public and share it with us, in which we can distribute it to even bigger audience. Next. This is just some of the highlights. So as you can see, I think pandemic is, of course, it's been bad since we can't see one another. But what it has enabled us is that it moves us online. So we've been able to increase our cadence in terms of holding an event because it's just much simpler, much faster. All you need is a webinar link. You don't need to book a hotel or or any expo space. You can do it online. People just sign up. People can listen, can learn, and we hope definitely they can learn. Well, some of the reports that we've also had is, one of the example is the global COVID-19 fintech market rapid assessment. Basically, we want to see as well what is the pandemic, the effect on pandemic on our users as well as our members. We've also released a lot of handbooks basically just to let the general public know how to choose a proper fintech companies, on how to manage their personal finance. And this actually delivered working together with our members, so everybody pitch in. And at the end of the day, our target again, it's to increase the financial literacy and to increase hopefully the financial inclusion by to achieve the target of 90% by in about 3 years. Next. So as you can see, fintech has been a very hot industry in the last 5 to 6 years. As you can see, this actually is reflected as well in the AFTEC membership. Back in 2016, when the first few companies gathered together and decided that we're gonna do this, we're gonna create an association. We started, even by end of 2016, we only started about 24 companies. And by today, I think by June 2021, we've already had more than 350 members. Granted, it's not all fintech companies. So we also open our memberships to financial institutions or even technology companies. So as you can see, Google, all the telcos are actually member of AFTEC as well. We have some banks, whether it's national banks or international banks like OCBC, Bank BRI, even Deutsche Bank is actually a member of us. And so we are very welcome to work with so many different stakeholders. I think the way we see is that in order for us to grow the financial technology industry, we have to work together. We have to collaborate with all the different stakeholders. And we certainly hope that AFTEC is actually the perfect hub for all these different stakes or different types of companies to work together and achieve a common goal, which is improving the industry itself and growing our industry, and everybody profits. Next. This is we chose to highlight these 4 different types of the startup member profile that we have. So in the beginning, majority of our members are actually payment system, right? Naturally, because back in 2015, 2016, those are the industry that has been more mature. I'm not saying I won't say it's mature, but matured, but it was more mature compared to the rest. So mostly was payment gateways, and they were actually regulated under the Bank Indonesia, which is our central bank, the BI's regulatory sandbox. Now, from 2017 onwards, of course, peer-to-peer lending boom. There was such a high growth. At the top, I think at the most, it's like 160 to 160 plus companies that was listed with the OJK. Now there's only about 125 listed, and 33 companies are fully licensed by OJK. So those 2 try, and then we also have equity crowdfunding, which is now I think only 3 companies actually fully licensed by OJK or Bank Indonesia, by OJK, and then 10 are still in the process of getting their license. And for the rest of it, the digital financial innovation. So OJK, our Financial Service Authority. Basically, this for payment is managed by central bank, and to a certain extent OJK as well. And then you have the peer-to-peer, which is peer-to-peer lending, which is actually managed by OJK, a certain directorate of OJK. And then there's the digital financial innovation, which actually consists of so many different business models, so many clusters that we speak of. I think about 16 plus clusters of 16 different business models. There are about 84 companies right now in what is called the OJK regulatory sandbox. Basically, what is this? It's mostly startups. So OJK allows the startup to kind of try out their initial idea, to see the traction in a sandbox framework, so that our users also feel secured when using our services. But of course, there are certain requirements that we have to meet, and certain regulatory compliance as well as regulatory reporting that we have to submit based on the different business models. Next. These are just I think the usual logo parade, but as you can see, there's so many different clusters that's represented here. So we have the aggregators. Aggregators basically, it's like an online portal or an online marketplace for all things financial products related. We have some wealth management, the aforementioned P2P lending, as well as equity crowdfunding, as well as the payment system. The payment systems like GoPay, OVO, Ondana, which are, we know it's mostly big in Indonesia and might not be in other countries yet. We also have now the new clusters for eKYC, because as you can see, as the digital economy boom and digital economy increases, and with the increase of the peer-to-peer lending, of course, we need to move all the digital signature online, as well as doing the KYC. This also help the players that are already in that industry to also grow together with us. We have InsurTech. Now we have financial planner as well to help with individuals with their financial planning. Next. Now with AFTEC, the organization structure itself, we split it into 3 different boards with specific and different roles and responsibilities. So we have the board of advisory. Basically, this is a board of advisory. There's 7 of them. And the head is the chairman of the board of advisory, is actually Pak Rudiantara. Pak Rudiantara himself is actually our ex-ICT ministry, and the board is consisting of our 2 founders of AFTEC, very senior people, Pak Niki Luhur as well as Pak Sebastian Togalang, and also with a very prominent business person. For board of ethics itself, it's actually also filled 7 people. It's chaired by Mr. JP Ellis, which is also one of the founding members of AFTEC. Together with representatives from cybersecurity, from legal firms such as Pak Freddy, which is going to be explaining in more details on how you can start or expand your business to Singapore from regulatory framework. And the last, of course, the board of directors, or what we call the management. I'm part of the board of directors, and our chairman is actually Pak Pandu Syahrir. And as you can see in the beginning in my previous slides, the growth of the members of AFTEC went from 24 to all the way to now is 355. So as you can imagine, in the beginning, there are not that many board of directors, right? I mean, there are only 24 companies. I mean, if we have 13 board of directors, that's pretty much every other company has a representative in the board of directors. So now the 13 board of directors actually represent the different industries as well, the different companies from our members, and it covers pretty much either regulatory communication channel, as well as with our government agencies, other different ministries, and also covers different topics such as cybersecurity, digital signature, and so on and so on. Next. Okay. That's actually it for my presentation. Back to you, Sham. Thank you.
Thank you, Padiki. Thank you, Padiki, for the good introduction and insight about Aftech. So this is a good starting point for both parties to collaborate. Not to further ado, because we are to end by 4 p.m., we have next Pak Ferdi. So a fair bit about Pak Ferdi background. Pak Ferdi Kunadi is from ABNR Consulate Law Firm. Pak Ferdi has over 2 decades of practicing law in Indonesia. He has been heavily involved in numerous complex cross-border deals, including project financing, merger and acquisition, investment, and employment matters, including dispute settlement. He also one of the pioneers that focus on digital industry and manage transaction involving technology setup such as Fintech, EduTech, and HealthTech. He has assisted from early stage funding, integration, exit, public offering, preparation to the regulatory compliance. Raffaele has been consistently being rated as a leading lawyer for the last half decade by several international publications such as Asia Law, Legal 500, and many more. He's also a member of the board of ethics for Indonesian Fintech Association, as Pak Diki mentioned. So Pak Ferdi will share with us an overview of the fintech regulatory landscape in Indonesia, which everybody is waiting for. I would like to hand over to Pak Ferdi. Pak Ferdi, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Syam. Thank you for the intro. Good evening, everybody.
Can you switch on your camera, Pak Ferdi? Thank you, Pak Ferdi.
I cannot because the host stopped it.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Over to you, Pak Ferdi.
Thank you, Syam. Hello. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to do this presentation and share some insight about the regulatory framework in fintech arena in Indonesia. So I think this is something that I would like to share this evening. Hope this can be useful at least for to know how to start the expansion in Indonesia. So we can start the presentation. Maybe maybe let's see the second or the third slide. Okay. In short, the fintech in Indonesia mainly governed and supervised by 3 authorities in Indonesia. This is the authority that's mainly monitor, give a license, and do the supervision. First, of course, central bank, or we so-called Bank Indonesia. That's Pak Diki already mentioned earlier about the role of Bank Indonesia. This is quite a very central and very important one. The Bank Indonesia will govern and issue the license and the determination of the fintech player. For first is for license for payment service provider, we so-called PGP. And then the second one is payment system infrastructure provider, PIP. Basically, this new regulation back in December 2020 and the implementing regulation a few months ago revamp and replace the previous regulation that quite having a lot of type of product, type of business model. So we will see in more detail in the next slide. And the second authority that also have a very important and quite strategic roles in the fintech in Indonesia. This is the OJK. OJK, maybe in English, is a Financial Service Authority. The regulation issued by OJK, number one is about the peer-to-peer lending back in 2016. Peer-to-peer lending was quite booming back in 2017-18. There are 2 types of status. The first one is registered. Second one is license. I saw in the Q&A box, someone, I saw the question from Siris Kumar. What is the difference between the registration or registered and license? Registered, basically, that's the first phase of so-called licensing, so-called licensing, not license, not licensing process in OJK for the P2P company. So they got the registration, they can do the operation, but this is something like an incubator phase where the OJK would like to see whether this company can survive in certain period So after this company can survive and can prove they do the business well, so they can apply the license. So that's like a two-step surveillance process by the authority. So peer-to-peer is very popular. Still have a good business to serve the unbankable community, the unbankable society in Indonesia, because still a lot of room to improve, room to do the business for the unbankable ecosystem here. So peer-to-peer still having a good prospect in Indonesia. So the second point is about the securities crowdfunding. That's in the past name equity crowdfunding, but the OJK just revamped the regulation to make it broader, not only govern about the equity, but also govern about the synthetic equity like exchangeable notes or convertible notes. So securities crowdfunding that's looks like a semi mini stock exchange to govern that the investors can do the investment together and then do the trading on the secondary market. So this is quite promising as well. Some of the player already improve and having a good growth. And the other box of the OJK is others. This is we so-called Sandbox. Sandbox having around 16 cluster that Pak Diki already mentioned earlier, that many type of business model that's not yet regulated in detail by OJK. They just register first, and OJK will have an as a role of observatory to see whether this type of business model should be governed in more details. So the next authority is Bapepti. So the Bapepti has the role to monitor and give license in fintech arena relating to crypto. Relating to crypto, because of crypto in Indonesia still considered as commodity, as an investment portfolio. So to do the investment and to do the trading and so on and so forth, subject to the Bapepti regulation and supervisory. So that's as a opening for the landscape. The main landscape is three authority here that will monitor and give license. So maybe next slide. So now we go in more details about the payment system provider. So this is a quite new regulation actually. December last year, the umbrella, and then the few months ago, that's in more details, regulation about the payment system. Next, please, to see the chart. Okay, this is the on the PGP, the payment services company. In the past, basically we have like e-money, acquirer, payment gateway, e-wallet, and money transfer. Yeah? So they rename and they do the more improvement in terms of the regulatory framework. They have the new name for e-money, that's account issuance service. Acquire and payment gateway, they do the new name. They give the new name the payment initiation or account acquiring service. On e-wallet, they give the name account information service, and fund transfer or money transfer, they have the remittance service. So more or less similar, but some improvement in more details. And the other one is PIP. Please the chart. So on the PIP, in the past there were principal switching, clearing, and final settlement. It is a bit different with the PGP. in the PIP, it is not license. Basically, it is a determination or penetapan in bahasa. So the new regulation only give the clearing and final settlement name of the penetapan, and the third one is supporting organizer service. So that's the landscape for the PIP. BIFAS is the one of the plan of the central bank, BIFAS, that may also gives fintech service that will also be overlap or cover the process of switching, also principal and clearing and final settlement. So that's something that quite a good development actually to make it more efficient in the infrastructure for transferring fund. Next slide, please. Okay, so we see in payment system provider, we have 3 categories in the current regulation, 1 to 3. Basically, for number 1 is very the broadest category that can cover basically everything on the front end business model. Account information service, payment initiation, acquiring service, account issuance service, and remittance. Second category, not as broad as type 1, but still good enough. It's more or less like a payment gateway type of business. This is account information service and payment initiation, acquiring service. The third one is for the limited, the most limited version of the TGP. This is for remittance service or transfer dana. So that's on the TGP, and foreign ownership can own up to 85%. But the control via voting rights shares only up to 49%. But rights to appoint director commissioners should be in the hand of Indonesian shareholder. But does not mean expatriates cannot be the directors or commissioner. On the PIP, the foreign ownership is quite small, is only 20%. Also the control, only 20%. But for the existing fintech company under BI, there is a grandfather rule that the limitation that was applicable in the past still valid unless they do the change of control. So next slide, please. Okay, that's on the BI regime. Now we move to on the OJK regime or FSA, Financial Service Authority. Back to now we discuss on the P2P. P2P is again was very popular because many unbankable community needs this type of service. So this P2P business model still have room to grow. This is something that that's when we see the statistic in the slide presented by Pak Diki, that it's quite clear that P2P players are the most. Okay, this regulation was the first regulation is 2016, end of 2016. Before that, although the P2P player was also have access before this regulation, but not under this OJK, then they have to convert and apply this license and this comply with this regulation. So basically, this is to provide financial service to gather borrower and lender through electronic system by using internet service. So that's to shortcut the process of how to meet lender and borrower. So this is quite popular as well in other country, I believe. So please continue the second part. Yes, the key player is lender, borrower, and electronic system. So the P2P infrastructures cannot do the financing to the borrower, because that's why the P2P company founder should set up different entity if they want to also give the funding. So let's say the founder A can set up PTX as the P2P, and then they have to do, or they set up another company to act as an anchor lender. So cannot the financing cannot do by the P2P company. After the booming in 2017 and 18, regulator changed a bit the policy and tighter requirement, and that's an impact now a bit smaller amount of player in the market. But recently I saw that the press release or in the news that the regulator may also still give opportunity for the new application for this industry. Next. So the registration and business license phase are the two main stages that any player must observe. The registration is the first one that the player should have, and then should comply with the requirement. This is basically easier than the business license, actually the requirement. But to get the registration itself is not a simple one. Still many documents, many interview, many presentation must be done by the applicant before OJK can give the green light for the registration. Next slide, next part, please. So the foreign ownership, 85%. This is quite promising, quite give opportunity for foreign investment. In Indonesia, the P2P has a lot of international player, international investor do the P2P business in Indonesia, because the maybe room to grow still big enough, and the interest rate quite high compared to the region. Next up. The maximum lending per transaction per borrower is actually quite big in Indonesian standard. Compare in Indonesian standard, that's a 2 billion. Maybe in US dollar around 140,000. Next point. So at least having one member BOD and BOC having experience in financial service. BOD and BOC of the P2P must do two things. First, if they want to be the director or commissioner, they must do they must follow the education and do the test. The test to make sure they have enough knowledge. After that, they must follow the fit and proper test by OJK. So basically, BOD and BOC in this industry more or less similar, has a similar difficulty level to be there, because not everybody can hold the position. Next. So P2P operator is prohibited from acting as a lender or borrower. So that's why this is only as an intermediary or matchmaker. They cannot do or part of the party in doing the transaction, to avoid the maybe conflict of interest in doing a transaction. Next. Yes, OJK, the authority also issued 2 circular letter. The first one is about the anti-money laundering back in 2021, earlier this year. So the guidelines, circular letter based on the OJK regulation 2017 govern that the P2P must also do the checking, KYC, and so on and so forth to make sure that anti-money laundering activity not happen in the P2P business. Next part, please. Yes, the regulation requires the P2P to do several things. Identify and set a risk scale base, stipulate risk tolerance, compile risk mitigation and control measures. Evaluate the residual risk, adopt a risk-based approach, and the last one, review and evaluate existing risk-based approach. So the SOP, the procedures in the P2P must cover all of these points. And must be submitted to OJK as well to make sure that OJK give the blessing. Next one. The directors also responsible. IT is safe and can support the business of P2P operators. So because the many also improper act by certain hacker or certain parties, that the IT here very important to give the very safe system of the P2P. Next one. The data center and data recovery must be in Indonesia, although maybe the backup we can have offshore, but the main one must be in Indonesia. But any personal data transfer to offshore must be consulted with the Ministry of Kominfo. Yeah. The next one. Strategic electronic system to support force and employ human resource with IT background. So the IT cannot be completely outsourced. So the IT must be also at least partially do in-house, yeah, to help the customer or to help the company when something happen in sudden situation. Next. Of course, IT risk management and digital signature is also allowed here. So far, I believe that OJK quite familiar and give the blessing for the reputable one for digital signature. The next slide, please. Okay, this is securities crowdfunding. Although this is quite new in 2020, but the OJK has also improved the regulation in 2021. So the securities crowdfunding now grow quite faster, because if it's only equity, there's some issues, some difficulties. First, about the foreign ownership limitation, because how the investee can control foreign investors do the investment via the securities crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding. Second is about the formality under the company law, but any change of shareholder must have a shareholders meeting, the notary must draw the deed and report to Ministry of Law. So that's a quite cumbersome. And the third one is about the tax. How the foreign taxpayer, if they do the transaction and have a gain, how the withholding can be done. Because if the stock exchange, if the foreign investor do the investment and have profit in the stock exchange, the regulation about the final tax and the administrative for the withholding and collection quite clear. For this one, I think we still have to see how the tax regime govern the transaction in the securities crowdfunding platform. Next. Because the government already revamped the regulation, so not only equity, now we can have securities. So it is broader terms than equity. So the debt or synthetic equity can be part of the securities in the crowdfunding platform. Foreign ownership 49%. And the platform cannot have affiliated with the issuer. Providing financial assistance for the investor, so cannot finance to do the participation in the crowdfunding, or provide the recommendation. Next slide, please. Regulatory sandbox that earlier discussed by Padiki. There are around 16 clusters, many potentially growing in the future. That's aggregators insurtech, blockchain-based credit scoring, eKYC, financial planner, and so on and so forth. That's the sample of the business model that may have better business here. So still OJK put in the observatory phase until the OJK think they need to issue the regulation. Please take a note that Sandbox is not a license. This is just a registration. So the OJK know, okay, this company is doing this. Next part. Multi-finance company or finance company. This is a quite old type of business model. But the revamp of the regulation give opportunity for multi-finance do the business via Internet of Things, IT. So the multi-finance quite important also type of business model. Normally team up with the peers-to-peers to collaborate in various business collaboration form. Next. The last authority is Bapepti. So the Bapepti, the commodity trading supervisory board, having an authority on the crypto. So as mentioned earlier, crypto basically categorized as a commodity, cannot be used as a payment. So the player in the crypto, five type of player. Number one is the exchange itself. Number two is the clearing institution. Please. Number three is the crypto asset seller or trader. Number four is the customer, like the normal investor who want to buy and keep the asset. Number five is the storage, like a custodian. So basically those are the key players, but as a customer we don't need the license, but the rest we have to obtain the license from Bapepti. Next slide. Okay, so crypto only considered as commodity, so not a payment method. So you cannot buy a car by giving up the crypto asset. Still, you have to pay by cash or credit if we want to buy a car. Crypto asset can be traded after fulfilling certain requirements. And the trading will be facilitated by a licensed future exchange, settled by a licensed clearing and conducted through a so-called crypto asset physical market. So the next slide, please. The next one, the view pointed. Of course, they must fulfill minimum capital. This is quite high for this type of business model. The minimum capital quite high. We can see on the next slide table comparison. Here is the comparison for various business model: PGP, PIP, P2P, securities crowdfunding. And also the second row, we see the comparison of foreign ownership. So if the Singaporean investor wish to have the shares in this type of fintech, you can check first how much, how many percent. But maybe most of the fintech as well, like other digital company, they already have a Singaporean holding normally. So people or investor normally do the investment in Singaporean holding. The OpCo is in Indonesia. So the third row, we talk about the name of the license. NIB is like the basic license for all companies, yeah. And then if they do the PGP, of course, license from BI, and PSA is for the electronic transactions player. This the first one is we compare 4 type of fintech. Next slide, please. This one is for the crypto matters, future exchange, future clearing, crypto asset physical seller, and storage. So if we see the paid-up capital, quite high compared to the first slide. Is you can see that 200 billion for the exchange. Even for only as a physical seller, already 50 billion. And the name of license, NIB, that's a basic one. And then the license from Bapepti, and for particular trader, crypto asset trader, that's a PSA. I think this is the last slide, yeah. Okay. Thank you everybody for attending. So Q&A session can start. Please feel free to raise.
Thank you, Pak Freddy. I think there's a good question coming from Sirish again. I think it's related to e-commerce platform enabling tracking of the transaction between B2B buyers and seller governed by other categories, or they do not require any permission from Bank Indonesia or Otoritas Jasa Keuangan. Maybe you can advise on this matter, Pak Freddy.
Are the platform enabling tracking of transaction between B2B buyers and sellers governed by other category, or do not require permission tracking transaction? I believe this one is under the Sandbox, yeah, enabling tracking of transaction. But maybe the issue is what how the tracking the transaction whether the B2B buyers or the B2B platform itself can give the access or not, or who going to give the access of this type of company, because personal data protection may also something that we need to observe, because not so easy to share the transaction data to outside because the platform itself, like B2B, we have a B2B platform here, but not sure whether they can get the consent to share and give the tracking to see the trend of the business. But I think if something that can happen, two things: first, personal data; second is I think they need to do the sandbox to make sure that OJK get aware of this type. That's I think my initial answer.
Thank you, Pak Freddy. I think Pak Sirish, if you have more question, you can drop us an email, and then Eunice can take on further on this. We have one more from Teddy TJ. Could you please give us an overview of the market landscape for the other 16 cluster outside P2P? So maybe I can give to Pak Diki first, and then Pak Freddy can add on. So Pak Diki, about this market landscape for the other 16 cluster outside P2P lending.
Sure. So I think I mentioned earlier in my presentation, right now there are about 84 companies registered or not registered, basically, yes, registered in OJK, covering all the 16 clusters. The biggest cluster has always been the aggregators, which is the market aggregators. And number two, I think, is alternative credit scoring. Right now, based on the regulations, after they are registered, the next phase would be to get a license. But I think OJK is working on the framework, on the requirements that each company from different clusters can get that license instead of just registration. Now, I think just to add to the earlier point as well, to Shirish Kumar's question, I think for one, why is there a registered and then there's license? Whether that's in peer-to-peer or the digital financial innovation. I think that's OJK's way of ensuring that companies do not spend a ton of money in the beginning, because some of the requirements you need capital investment, such as getting ISO 27000 certified and things like that. And those are like really hard things to do for startups. So what they've done is they will let startups try to operate and try to prove themselves. And I think Pak Freddy mentioned earlier, to get traction. And from there, you can start adding or fulfilling all the requirements that's needed in order to get the full license. And to add to Pak Freddy's point, I think it really depends on the transactions that you're trying to track. I mean, if it's just sales transactions, you might not need to be registered with OJK or BI, but at the end of the day, it is always best to consult with OJK, and we at AFTEC we can actually help facilitate that discussion as well. And if the OJK feels that this should not be regulated under them or registered under OJK, they will let you know, and then you basically just have to be a certified electronic system provider, which is under the ICT minister, which is Kominfo.
Thank you, Pak Diki. Pak Freddy, any further comment on that question?
I think already covered all by Pak Diki.
Yeah, fantastic. I just have one last question, Pak Diki and Pak Freddy. So as you know, Singapore companies who want to enter Indonesia, as you can see, they can't own 100% ownership. So is it to be necessary to find a partner to join AFTEC association first, or Singapore company can join AFTEC association even they are based in Singapore? I mean, Pak Diki, maybe you can explain a bit more.
I think for AFTEC, right? It's an Indonesian Fintech association. So I think you will go through certain kind of due diligence process when you register to be a member of AFTEC. Of course, we prefer those that are serious about going into Indonesia. or already have a business set up in Indonesia and not just thinking to partner. Because I mean, if you're only planning to partner and do business with Indonesian fintech companies, you actually don't have to be an AFTEC member. I mean, you can just, you can just do business with them. You don't have to be our member.
Fantastic, thank you. I think the upcoming business matching is a starting point for collaboration within both parties. Eunice, I'll hand over to you. Maybe you can explain a bit more on the business matching. Thank you, Pak Diki, and thank you, Pak Freddy, for your time and for all your explanation. Really appreciated on your time taken for this webinar. So I hand over to Eunice. Eunice, thank you, Eunice.
Thank you. Thank you, Sham. Thank you both speaker, Pak Diki and Pak Freddy. Thank you very much for sharing the insights and what is the tips that required in order to expanding to Indonesia. And now I actually need Ayani. Can you help me to flash the QR code now? Yeah. Okay. So as promised earlier, so these sessions will be followed by a virtual business matching sessions in Q1 next year. So even though border control measures are still going on and the physical interactions are still limited at this point of time, but we hope that these virtual business matching sessions will be served as a platform that we provide our members, a place where you can share your products and solutions and connect with the Indonesian partner and fast track your business growth in Indonesia market. So take out your phones and you can scan this QR code right now, and it will link you to a job forms, and you can fill in why you want to expand to Indonesia and what kind of partners that you are looking at. And after collections of all this information, so we can work together with FTech and also SBF and to see how we do this business matching. So again, we thank you everyone on behalf of Singapore Fintech Associations, Singapore Business Federations and FTech. I would like to thank every one of you for making time in your busy schedules to join us today. And we hope that you found this session informative and useful. The recording will be made available for 2 weeks in our LinkedIn page. And we would also like to request for your assistant to complete a post-event survey when you exit the webinar later. So we would love to hear from you any feedback or suggestions that you may have for us. So, and now we are going to end our session today and have the wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, Eunice. Thank you. Thank you, Pak
Thank you,
Diki.
Eunice.
Thank
Thank you,
Thank
Sham.
you,
Thank you, everyone.
everyone. Thank you, Eunice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Sham,
Have a good day.
Pak Freddy, Pak Digi.
Thank you.
Bye.